Hey, everybody. Today on the show, Jason Bay, Jay Bay, sales trainer, teacher extraordinaire. What'd you think, Maurice? Lots of gold there, huh?
Wow, yeah, that's something that I really had to think about because I was so busy writing down notes,
Yep. Oh, yeah.
take notes and really try to remember it all. Yeah, if you're at all remotely working in sales or have to lead salespeople or are somewhere in that environment, in that ecosystem, this is the show for you. This is the
Oh, yeah.
episode, right? And I think it's the second one that we have of that kind where, as a salesperson, get something to write, sit straight, have something to drink, and take notes because it's super interesting what Jason had to say.
And
Yeah,
I just love the heart behind it too. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
full of energy with it. Yeah. So yeah, fantastic. Stay tuned, watch it or listen to it. It's super nice. All right, here we go.
Because really, what could go wrong once you press record,
Exactly.
right?
What could go wrong? It's all got to be very perfect.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Crazy People Doing a Podcast, the Crazy People Podcast. I'm Russ. Maurice is strangely absent for the moment, but in the hot seat today, friend of the podcast, Jason Bay. Welcome, Jason. How you doing, man?
Happy to be here. We've known each other for a little while now, so it's good to reconnect. We caught up a little bit prior to hitting recording, so I'm happy to be here, man.
No, it's great to have you, man. Do me a favor, give the audience maybe 30 seconds of who's Jay Bay? What's going on with you?
Yeah, so I run a company called Outbound Squad. So the problem that we help with is, if you've ever been on the receiving end of a bad cold email or had someone, call your cell phone relentlessly and leave weird voicemails or connect and pitch with you on LinkedIn, we sort of help with that part of it. So how do we, as either a sales rep selling business to business, my software, my services, or maybe I'm a business owner doing a little bit of outbound, how do we do this in a way that's feels a little bit better on the soul, a little bit more customer centric, is in a way that's much more effective and speaking to what my prospects care about versus pitching my solution. We help with that piece of the equation. And then the other piece of the equation is, hey, when I do get someone on a Zoom call and we're having that, quote unquote sales conversation, how do I do this in a way where instead of me just coming in and talking all about what we do, how do I figure out a little bit more about what the other person cares about, who else on their team might care about it, what impact they're trying to make, what problem you're trying to solve, and really run a sales process that feels less salesy. That's really the two kind of big areas that I play in.
That's cool. It's salespeople are humans. You mean they're not sales machines? Jeez.
Yeah,
Crazy.
that whole expression, the
Yeah.
sales hat. I'm like,
Yeah.
you don't need to put any hat on. You're just a person
Yeah.
talking to another person. You should really try to. Yeah, I think there's a lost art to just connecting with people,
Mhm.
just being able to do what we did before this. Just talk about like what's going on in the other person's life, or in this case, their business or whatever, and just have a connection.
Yeah.
Genuine human connection is what people really, really want. And if you're having to sell virtually for the first time, post COVID, that's
Mhm.
another skill that you have
Yeah.
to learn how to connect with people through a computer screen, which I'm happy to talk about. But that's yeah, I think finding genuine connection, that's really what sales is all about. How do I
Yeah.
get this as quickly as possible to the point where we're just having a candid conversation? That may turn into a sale, may not, but how do we just get kind of past the corporate speak and the
Yeah.
formality and all that kind of weird stuff?
Yeah. No, that's cool. So, but you didn't just come up with this like today, right? There's an origin story
Yeah.
of how you came to this
Yeah.
conclusion and this place. Where does Jason Bay originate? What's the origin story?
Yeah. So I was, just to paint the picture, because I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, I was very shy as a kid. So I remember even some of my earliest memories, fourth, fifth grade, probably fifth grade, I was playing soccer. I scored a goal
Mhm.
and everyone in the stands is clapping. My parents told me this. I don't even remember it.
Yeah.
As soon as I figured out that everyone was clapping for me and they were like paying attention to me, I was so mortified that the coach had to put me on the bench because I just couldn't play at that point. And I was just so shy. And that really took me through middle school and high school, where you probably would never catch me starting a conversation with someone that I didn't know. That felt very scary to me. And I felt like my friends and all of these other people had this superpower that I just did not have.
Yeah.
So the way that I sort of got over that, my very first job in college, well, prior to college, I stacked wood in a cart at a mill for 60 hours a week. Oof. That really sucked. And I said, I never want to do this again. So my freshman year,
good for bodybuilding, not good for skill building.
Oh, it was so hard on my body. And that's probably the best shape I've ever been in my entire life. And every, 10-hour day was just like, oh man, it's crazy. So what I ended up doing though, is my first sales job was as a freshman in the spring and summer. I would go door to door selling house painting services. So I worked for a company where they teach you essentially how to run a house painting franchise. So I never did any of the painting. I went door to door, had my friends help me. I would pay them, go door to door. We get leads, we do estimates. That's where I got my first formal sales training. And then from there, what I would do is, hire painters and all that kind of stuff. And it ended up working out really well for me. I mean, I made like 30 grand almost over the summer.
Wow.
For school. So at that point, I was like, I love sales, right? This is awesome. So that was in 2008. I was a sales manager for them for a little while. Then I became a marketing director for them. And then I sort of left on my own. So I'm happy to dig into more detail wherever you want. But that's how I got into sales, was getting doors slammed in my face. 19-year-old with braces, all that kind of stuff.
Well, the shy kid suddenly taking the job going door to door, that's like a smoker quitting cold turkey, right? You're quitting shyness cold turkey. But $30,000, to be fair, is pretty good incentive to to quit being shy and figure out something else, right?
Well, it was a 100% commission job too. So I'd never done that before, and I just really thought that was really appealing. And to be fair, the way that I was recruited, I have to say they weren't totally transparent that I would be going door to door as much as I did. They kind of made it sound like you start to do this and then you put ads in the newspaper and then people call you. And that's kind of not what the experience was like. The lesson I learned from that experience is there's always another door to knock on. So no matter how the experience goes in the moment, you can make all of this stuff up in your head around how angry this person's going to be. And, I'd interrupt people, Russ, like during their dinner. There was all kinds of stuff like that would happen. And you start to play all of these games in your head around this stuff. And no matter what happens, there's always another door.
So Jason, back up for a half a second and tell us about how did they recruit you to this job going door to door for a shy kid who never did this before?
Yeah. So I originally went to college to learn about forensic science. So I wanted to become a forensic scientist because I watched a lot of CSI, right? And I was like, oh, that'd be really cool.
That's a shy kid career. Very good. Yeah.
I'm like, you could analyze evidence every now and then. You get to bust down a door. You get to arrest someone, and be the superhero. Well, it turns out that's like multiple people's jobs in one, right? And in Oregon, where I grew up, I think they had 2 or 3 forensic scientists in the entire state. So I was thinking, wow. And I don't want to sit in a lab all day. And they don't even let you know what case you're working on, because they don't want you to have any bias, right? So I was sitting in a law enforcement class. It was like law enforcement 201 or something like that. And at the very beginning, he became one of my best friends, a guy named Barry. He became one of my best friends, and he was my first sales manager. Mm-hmm. He mentioned this opportunity to run a business over the summer and make some money for school. And the pitch was, run a business, get an internship, make $10,000 over the summer. And the summer prior, when I was stacking wood on a cart, as I had mentioned, I made about $5 grand, maybe $6 grand after taxes. And that was like busting my ass for 60 hours a week, Mm-hmm. So that sounded really appealing to me. So I immediately signed up. I got recruited. And the first thing I did was I went and bought a book on Little Red Book of Selling by Jeffrey Gitomer to learn what sales was, because I didn't really know what that was. And then I bought a house painting for dummies book, because I didn't know anything about house painting or construction or or what siding and trim and eaves were. I didn't know any of that kind of stuff.
This has got to be the best first sales call ever. Can we paint your eaves? We don't have eaves. What? Where are they? What's going on over here? Yeah. No, it's all siding. Can we paint your? No, you can't. Can what? Slam, right? So the shy kid, the forensic scientist, door slams in your face. But after the summer, as you had said, there's always another door that's going to open, right? There's always another door you can knock on. So how do you get from I've learned some things to now where you are today? Was it all success, all up and to the right?
Well, to be totally candid, the sales part came pretty naturally to me. So I was pretty good at sales right from the get-go. Like my manager, the way that you were supposed to get trained was they go do 3 estimates with you. They take 2 hours a piece. So they teach you how to build rapport with people, how to do the whole shebang. You don't just calculate what it's going to cost and leave a bid on the doorstep. There's an actual sales process, right? He goes like 0 for 5 with me the first day. So this is like a Saturday, goose egg. And you're supposed to book about a quarter of them on the spot. And your manager's supposed to come out and show you like how to be awesome at sales, right? Yeah. But the next day, I don't remember thinking, oh God, what did I get myself into? I remember thinking, I would have done things a lot different than he did. And like, I can't wait to take the reins on this. So the next day, the first thing I ever sell is like restaining someone's deck for $1,900. And I remember I called up my manager and I was like, I know they're supposed to sign a contract, but which one is that? I didn't even know where they were supposed to sign or how they pay or anything like that. Right. So it ended up going really well. But where I really struggled was the next year I became a sales manager. Part of that is recruiting. So you got to be good at giving those class announcements and doing a one-to-one kind of information session and interviewing people, which is a type of sales. And then the thing that I really struggled with was how to skill transfer. You know, how do I take what I know how to do really good and teach someone else how to do it? The biggest lesson I learned is that your biggest strengths will be your team's biggest weaknesses because you don't think about your strengths. These are things that you do intuitively. So for me, that was really hard. So that took a year for me to learn how to be a good sales manager and how to coach and lead and do all that kind of stuff. And then the couple of years after that, I was a sales manager, finished, top 10 in the country. And then where I really learned how to do what I do now around presenting and speaking and doing that kind of thing was as a sales manager, you would have to get up in front and you would teach a topic. So I might be teaching a topic on objection handling. So when a homeowner says, we want to wait, we can't afford it, not right now, I'm going to hire the other contractor. How do you handle that? So you got to get up and actually do a workshop style thing. And, I'm like 19, 20 years old. So I had to be taught how to do that, how to learn that. And then when I got promoted in that company, I moved down to their corporate office and I actually became a marketing director / corporate sales trainer. So I would travel all around the country running trainings for all these college kids, teaching people how sales works. And that's where I really refined the skill of like presenting and engaging people and running workshops and like teaching and the role plays and all the stuff I've done for, now, that was 2009 when I started doing that. So it's, I've been presenting or speaking in one form or another for 13, 14 years at this point, and I really about 6 years ago honed in on, B2B, mostly software. About a third of my clients sell professional services like recruiting or other kinds of professional services. And that's where I've really kind of refined into like very specific skill sets that I teach. But for me, what I've always really loved doing is seeing the transformation. When you can get someone who hasn't received a lot of sales training that mostly just does it, like think of how we cook. Usually, most of the time, we aren't taught how to cook. You just kind of start doing it and you develop all these habits or you see some stuff. And then when someone actually shows you like proper knife skills, like how to even hold a knife, probably when you're cutting stuff, it's like mind blown, right? Or, hey, when you cook any kind of meat, don't put it onto a cold pan. Get the pan sizzling and you want to sear the crust. When someone teaches you that for the first time and you've been doing it completely differently your whole life, it just like your mind just gets blown a little bit. I love doing that where someone's been doing something in a way for a certain amount of time. And most companies don't really train their reps that well. And you get to come in and give them something that's immediately valuable, that makes them feel better about their job, makes them perform better. All of that kind of stuff I find really rewarding now.
Oh, that's very cool. And that's our experience working together, now a couple of years ago. I think that was some of the stuff that I think I saw in in your style, that I said, this guy's like different from all the quote unquote experts that are out there, because he actually really, he cares about this stuff. He gets empowered and enlivened, and gets jazzed by seeing people learn and grow, which was very cool.
Yeah. I think that one of the biggest things that I try to do is I learn a lot from the reps that I work with. So one of the very first things that I say, and I think this is a pro tip for anyone that does any kind of outside help where you get hired by a company and come work with people at their company, is I just say, I said this to your group. I was like, hey, I just want to let you guys know I've never like sold the types of services that you sell, like nearshoring. I've never sold that before. And I don't sell the thing that you sell right now, and I don't sell to the people that you sell to. So if anyone feels like I'm speaking out of turn, do you feel comfortable holding me accountable to that? And I get everyone to agree to do that. Yeah. And that usually eases the tension, where I'm not trying to come in and like tell you how to do your job. I've just figured out some of the other stuff around the soft skills of selling your thing and some frameworks that are pretty ubiquitous across whatever you sell that I think would really help you. And I've taken the time to understand your world as best as I can. So let's learn together kind of thing is, I think, the best approach usually. I think it's a good pro tip for leaders too, like new leaders that come into companies. When you try to, no one likes a know-it-all. And I think a lot of people in positions of authority, whether you're hired or in those leadership positions, try to just come in and really dictate how things are done. And it just doesn't really work that well. We've all had parents do that to us growing up.
Oh man, mom, come on.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the soft skills of sales, right? And as a long decades and decades of experience of selling, no, marketer at heart. So what are, in your mind, what are the two top skills that any salesperson should have? Soft skills, that is.
Yeah, soft skills. I can give, we can keep it pretty general. I think one of them is the ability to, like, active listening is a skill. So hearing what someone says is different than being able to decipher what they might mean. And I think the active listening part comes with a genuine curiosity of, so if I had to, what's kind of going on at play here, there's a really good book called You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy that's really good to pick up. The thing I always joke about is my wife actually, like, she gave that book to me as homework to read. Was, I'm not shitting you. And which the irony, me being a sales trainer, right? So they talk about shift versus support. So it works like this. If Maurice, if I asked you how your weekend went and you said, hey, I went out to the pub or whatever, I did this. And I said, oh yeah, I went out too. And I did this and I like this. I'm immediately shifting the focus of the conversation onto me. And that's what most people do, including myself, in our everyday conversations, is we think about what other people say through our world and how it applies to us. Supporting is literally the opposite. That would be me leaning in and saying, oh, like, you went to a public, what kind of scene you're in? Was it really lively? Do you have to go to a place that's pretty chill? Do you drink ciders? Do you like Hefeweizens? Like, what do you like to drink? Like, I'm leaning in and supporting. So that skill of active listening and really being able to practice sitting in the seat of the other person and just being genuinely curious about what they're sharing. That's probably skill number one. That is like the biggest pattern interrupt. Most salespeople suck at that. And you just asking great questions and just listening is really, really big. The other thing that I would say as a skill is being able to act in spite of any kind of fear that you might have. So one of the things I learned, I'm a big proponent of therapy. One of the things I learned from my therapist, Sam, it's called the CBT triangle. So it's cognitive behavioral therapy triangle. Essentially what this triangle shows you is the relationship between your behavior, your thoughts, and then your emotions. And specifically the impact on the things that you think about and the feelings that you have driving your behavior. So for example, if I feel really anxious because I'm told that I need to cold call some prospects, what that might drive in my thinking is, oh God, cold calling, that doesn't work. I'm going to be interrupting the person, et cetera. And that might control my behavior. Not calling, right? Procrastinating, feeling really anxious, whatever. I think what you have to be really good at in sales, and this is specifically applies to running a business as well, is you have to be willing to not let your thoughts and emotions drive your behavior. And I think that one of the big things that people tend to have in sales is called call reluctance, but reluctance to do hard stuff because they don't want to be pushy, it feels dirty, whatever it might be. So those are the kind of the two things that come off the top of my head, is like active listening, and then being able to take action and do things that are uncomfortable. Like take risks, right? Your risk tolerance in taking risks is probably that's the skill that I would call that.
That's interesting. So it's what would you say? Is it more about the risk tolerance to get started, or is it more difficult to have a tolerance of frustration where people tell you no? Because depending on the product and depending on the sales model you have, you're gonna hear no a lot, right? So, or is it a combination of both? Do you have to kind of like be like a basketball shooter where you say, hey, Steph Curry, we call him the greatest shooter of all time, but even he only hits 40% of all shots, right?
Yeah. So resilience would be a third skill that I would add then. Sales is a really funny job because, okay, so you said Steph Curry hits it 40% of the time. Every salesperson here would be going out of their mind if they closed 40% of the deals that they worked. If 40% of the time when they got a call with a prospect, it converted into a meeting, they would be absolutely thrilled with that. Sales is like imagine all of the interactions. Think about all the interactions you've had today, and think about if you got rejected in 95% of those interactions where the person just didn't want to talk to you for whatever reason. You want to go buy coffee at Starbucks, you go there and be like, no, we're not going to serve you. Next. It's like, okay, like imagine if that happened like 95% of your actions. That's what it's like 8 to 10 hours a day for a salesperson. It's like 90% of people just don't want to interact with them. There's a lot of reasons for that we could impact, but I think resilience, and it takes a lot of trust, like adherence and consistency are really big in sales. You have to like adhere to a system, and hopefully that's a good system that works. And then you got to be really consistent with it and then have faith. So consistency and resilience are probably two other things that I would add to the list. The cool thing is that like those are learnable skills, but I mean, they say that people are the most scared in life of like public speaking. I bet you people are more afraid to cold call than they are to public speak. This has got to be one of the hardest skills in the world to do on a consistent basis, because you face rejection. Like public speaking, okay, cool, it doesn't go that well and you don't get a good reaction. Well, when you cold call, you get a reaction every time, especially when you do it door to door in person. You get a reaction every single time.
Yeah, at least in public speaking, I'm some distance from the audience, and they can't just like yell at me and hang up on me. That'd be impolite. But yeah, cold calling, absolutely.
In public speaking, they've kind of agreed to be there.
Yeah,
that's the thing with cold calling that makes it so hard, is they didn't agree. They didn't agree to that interaction. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, you catch them by surprise.
Yeah, that's true. And also, in all fairness, cold calling, you have to do it probably every 90 seconds, 3 minutes. You have to, if you're really after it, if you really have to work a list, you do it that often, right? Every 3 minutes, let's say. Luckily, the public speaking, you don't have to do it that often, right? It's maybe an hour if it's really tough, and then you kind of move on. But yeah, I like your approach there. I like the context there, how you bring it together, the active listening and so on. Because I see for myself and for my team, oftentimes they're just picking up is really hard. And then especially if you have like list calling, people hear a lot of no's, and I say, hey, that's an opportunity for you, right? Just try something out, try something new, try a different angle, and don't worry about it, right? There will be people that say no, that say yes, actually, right? It's absolutely normal, right? So especially if you have a younger team. So how do you see a difference between training younger salespeople versus somewhat older salespeople?
Definitely. Well, if we use younger and older, I would interchange those with inexperienced and then very experienced. It has more to do with that. So if we take an SDR whose first job out of college, they're 22, 23 years old, that's a very different person that's much more malleable than someone that's been doing it for 20 years. So the younger folks, I think the biggest misconception about, so I will speak specifically to generation now. I think the biggest misconception about young salespeople is that they don't know how to use the phone because they didn't grow up with it. Mm-hmm. I think it's the biggest misconception ever. Oh yeah, they grew up in a FaceTiming generation and a texting generation and IM, so they never had to talk to people over the phone. Yeah, but they talk to people in everyday life. I mean, come on, right? I think the biggest difference is that Gen Z especially, dude, they're just willing to speak up more when they're asked to do something that's really crazy. So if you as a sales leader just give them a script that says, yeah, say these things, call these people, and you don't educate them on what do the people I'm talking to even care about? And oh, by the way, this script, it sounds really salesy. That's just not how a human talks. If you don't give them good stuff, Gen Z is just a generation that's more likely to challenge authority.
Yeah.
And I think that the youngest generation is always the more likely generation to challenge authority. That's just sort of how it works. So I would think that if you're having trouble, if you're listening to this, getting your younger team, whether it's salespeople or anything, to do something, just think, am I taking the approach where I'm just trying to tell them what to do and just dictating it to them? Or do I get them bought into it and let them participate in the creation of the process, get their feedback, involve them in it so they feel like they're a part of something versus just being dictated something? Now, the more experienced salespeople, I think the toughest part for them is it's just like what I shared earlier around someone that's been cooking one way their entire life. And I'll give you an example. My dad, this is funny. So my wife and I were over at my parents' place and we were making hamburgers and my dad was putting French fries into the oven. Well, one of the things when you take frozen French fries or any kind of frozen food, if you crowd the pan and everything is touching each other, it won't get crispy because the ice will melt and it'll steam versus like really cook and sear it, right? So my wife is like pointing out to my dad, hey, the pan's kind of crowded. We should like take half of those and like split up the pans. And this was like he had never thought of it like that before. He's like 60, right? So he's been cooking frozen French fries the same way for probably like 40 years, 50 years. So when you take a salesperson who's just been doing the same thing the same way for decades, that's hard to unlearn those habits. So the approach is very different. With a very inexperienced person, I'm teaching foundational things like, hey, the first time you do this, or let's try this with your process. When we cold call, let's break it down in this way. With an experienced person, I'm saying, hey, let's take one thing that you're doing right now consistently already, and you want it to be better. And let's just try to change that thing or stack onto that habit. So instead of trying to get you to do new stuff, let's take something you're doing right now and let's just tweak it to make it better. The thing that I want to get as quickly as possible is a win for a really experienced person, because then they'll believe me. So how do I make it really easy to do these small tweaks that get really good results? It's the saying, as small hinges move big doors. Like, where's the biggest points of leverage where I can get a really quick ROI on their time? That's the focus with more experienced people usually.
That's really good. As a salesperson, I like the getting people involved and getting them to participate, because I think that is an absolute underappreciated statement that you made there, right? Today, especially in the I feel like especially in the Web 2 or in kind of the internet and social media world, everybody has a voice and uses it, right? So if you just put something in front of them, they are so used to commenting what it is that you're seeing there, they don't even think about it anymore, right? So you have to make them and become active participants, as you said, right? So that they cannot just leave their feedback and kind of lose interest, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you see?
Oh, you mentioned the word feedback. I think is so important. It's something I talk with sales leaders a lot about. If you think about it, your objective when you're leading a team of people is to create an environment where the sum is greater than the individual.
Mhm.
You can't get that if people don't feel comfortable giving feedback and contributing to what you're doing. You don't get to benefit from the collective brain. So that's your objective. A really great strategy for doing that, and it's one of the most underrated things that I've seen, is to ask for feedback in public. And you're not going to get a lot of it, but actually take the feedback and put it into action. Most leaders that complain, that I see that complain that their team is not open and coachable, I'm like, you're not coachable either, dude. Like, people are giving you feedback and then you shoot it down in front of everyone. Yeah, I'm not going to give feedback in that environment either, dude. It doesn't feel, it's emotional safety is what that's called.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that anytime you get feedback as a leader, acknowledge it. You don't have to agree with it, but you could say, hey, Russ, thank you so much for that feedback. What I'm hearing you say is that you feel really kind of uncomfortable and salesy using the current script. It just doesn't feel very, very natural to you. And if you had something that felt like a little bit more you might be more inclined to use that. Did I hear you right? Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, that's great feedback. So team, how do you think that we could make this a little bit more conversational? Let's come up with something else that Russ can test together. That's great feedback, Russ. And I want to encourage all of you, if something feels uncomfortable, let us know. Don't you wish you heard that more in the companies that you work in, where the leaders and the executives especially talked more like that? You'd be like, wow. So I think that similar to parenting, I would imagine, I don't have kids yet, but a lot of the behavior I learned as an adult and as a kid is modeled off of my parents. It's not what they told me to do, it's what they did. So as a sales leader or any kind of leader, you just need to demonstrate what good looks like and actually live the advice that you're giving. And it's such a simple principle. It requires a lot of work and discipline. But I love that you brought up Maurice feedback, because that's such an important thing. Like, having a culture where people can provide feedback is so important.
Yeah. But sometimes what I see, I like your approach there, but what I see sometimes is that people look at you, especially if they're younger, they're like, really? You want my feedback? I'm new at this. I've been doing this all about 5 minutes, right? Why would you want my feedback? And then what I tell them is, look, I hired you because you're smart. I hired you for all your perspectives. So please bring it in, because otherwise you're robbing the team of your insights, of your perspective, and of all of this. And then people look at you like, what? And then if the rest of the team is not actually chiming in like, oh yeah, he's serious about that, and then you kind of see that develop. And here's the question coming out of that: how do you make it more secure for people that they actually buy in, that they believe what you're saying? I mean, you kind of described it in some way, but let's elaborate on that further.
Yeah, I think buy-in there's a couple of components to buy-in, because that's really, anytime we're trying to use like some lingo here, transformation, right? You hear thrown around a lot. Transformation is a really fancy way of saying we're trying to get people to do something that's really freaking hard. And we're going to get a lot of resistance with that, but this is going to be a really important thing, we think, that will move the company forward, right? Buy-in is a really big part of that. So buy-in requires a couple of things. One, you have to be good at selling the idea and the reason why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. And what I think about a lot is there's a framework called Format. It's the number 4 and then MAT. I think it might have been invented in Australia for higher education, but it's what they use to create curriculum. So anytime we're explaining a concept, we need to talk about why it's important, the bullet points of what you need to do, and then give some really tangible how. It's what we've been doing a lot of in this call, actually. So a lot of times, if we use my world as an example, a sales leader might come in and say, we're going to start using MEDDIC. It's a qualification framework. Okay, guys. So what you're going to need to start asking for in your deals is, what metrics are there involved? We're going to need to get really good at economic buyers and all this other kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, but why? Why are we going to do this thing? Why are we doing it differently than we were doing before? So I think having a really strong why and being able to tell, and there's lots of ways that you can do that. One is through stories. One is by having people on the team speak up about why they think doing this thing is important. There's all kinds of things that you can do. So the why and being able to sell the vision, super important for buy-in. The second piece is collaboration. We've already talked about this. So whatever you're going to do, have people participate in the creation of it. So the first thing I did with your team, Russ, when I worked with you guys, is we created a messaging matrix. And you know what we did as a team? We plotted out as a team together what our prospects care about. So everyone got to participate in the creation of the stuff that we were doing. So collaboration is really big. The next thing is what I call rubbing shoulders, is how I was taught. And it was getting in the pit. So if I want, as a sales manager, my team to cold call, you know what I better be good at? I better be good at cold calling. I'm not going to spend all day doing it, but I better be able to show them how it gets done. Yeah. Right. So get in the pit, show them how it gets done. And then the last part is reinforcement. So we can't just talk about something one time and roll it out. Like, there has to be ongoing reinforcement of that thing. And it has to get brought up. It has to get measured. There has to be accountability. There's got to be all that kind of stuff. So really good at selling the vision. We need to collaborate and participate. We need to get in the pit and do it together with people. And then we need to reinforce it. The people that are leading the people doing this need to be really good at coaching and reinforcing and holding people accountable.
Fantastic. Hey, Jason, let us shift for a second. I find, for all the few minutes that I'm on here, I find it amazing, your approach. But where's this coming from? How did you get started? And more importantly, how do you stay on top of the newest development? How do you make sure that everything that you know, that you are progressing, that you are sharpening your skills, and that you are remaining kind of like a step ahead of everybody that you're teaching? How do you go about this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that my rule is that I never teach something to someone else that I either am not proficient at myself or that my other clients have put into action and gotten results from it. What's really easy to do in my profession as a consultant, coach, or trainer is to say things that sound really nice in theory. There's a lot of New York Times best-selling books that are full of fluffy theory that sound really good and that are not actually applicable. So that's a thing for me that I'm really big on. So it's got to work in order for me to teach it. In terms of, I think you learn things a lot of ways. For me, what I force myself to do is stay really grounded with what the day-to-day looks like for the clients that I help. So I'm not a sales development rep anymore that's making cold calls for 4 or 5 hours a day, but I spend a lot of time with these people.
Yeah.
And I make calls myself still, so I am still grounded in what they do. And if you want to get really something very tangible, I think that's a slippery slope, is when you get really used to teaching stuff in a group setting where there's no feedback loop, you never get to see how things are applied. So I'm working with a team of SDRs right now. It's about 35 SDRs, and we're talking cold calling mostly is where we're at right now. So it's like, I teach something, I put them into breakout rooms, and then I listen to them practice. And then I listen to them, like recordings of them doing the thing that we're talking about. And then I'm able to see how things are applied. And like the goal in teaching is to like shorten and narrow the gap of the time it was taught to the time it's successfully implemented. That's like the thing I'm trying to compress as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way, I think, is staying really, really close and grounded with like how they're using the stuff that I'm teaching. And then the other thing is, I don't know, this is mostly just, I'm an optimizer. This is what me and my wife both have in common. We have a growth mindset, and a big part of what we really care about is just optimizing stuff and making it better. And I think the challenge for someone that's an optimizer like myself is choosing what to optimize, because, and I've gotten much better at that. You can't optimize everything in life. There's not enough time for that, and you'll drive yourself crazy, right? So I'm like, where's the ROI high? Well, the stuff that I optimize in my relationship, the ROI is very high because I'm going to be happier. Like, it's hard to put a price tag on that, right? And the stuff in business, I'm always thinking, like, I literally have notes open on my other screen here of, I was doing a training earlier on cold email, and I was like, oh man, people were asking a lot of questions about this one topic, this part of cold email that I didn't teach about. I have to incorporate that the next time I teach it. So I think looking at things like an iteration where I'm never going to create something and then have it be really great. I need to accept the fact that something can always be better, but that's a process and that can happen over time. That's my mindset around it, is how do I make this better the next time that I do it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that optimization mindset is such a killer, right? It's because
Yeah.
people think about a lot about, well, crap, I didn't do that right, I failed. But
Mhm.
you didn't if you can make it a little better next time, a little better next time, and a little better next time. And then, boy, you look back a year later and it's like, wow, right?
No,
How does
totally. That's kind of where I'm at right now. It's like I wish you could see, Russ, the stuff that how I teach stuff now compared to 2 years ago with your team. It's just like 10 times better, in my opinion. It's because of that constant optimization. It's like investing, putting money into the bank every
yeah,
month, and letting the compound interest of your optimizing, stack up, so to speak.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think too often in business we're trying to find the next Bitcoin and not doing well, I'm just going to put away
Yeah.
$10 every week, and soon
Yep.
enough, look, I'm gonna have $1 million, right? And sometimes that iteration, rather than the moonshot or the home run shot, the iteration pays off better in the long run, right?
Totally. Yeah. Don't look for the diet pill, because that's really what Bitcoin is. Just like you're gambling.
Yeah,
You might get lucky and it's fun to do. And I have no judgment towards those people, but
yep.
it's like you're looking for the quick win. When most good things in life, in my experience, and a lot of other people's experience, doesn't come super quickly. I mean, look at the stuff you're doing with your church, Russ, like all the stuff
Mhm.
you're learning. It's like, dude, that takes a lot of time to learn all of that stuff. You don't just like go to a class one day and you're like, you know, totally ready to go,
Yeah, yeah.
So I think being able to have some self-compassion is really big. That's something I'm really big on, where it's like, don't be too hard on yourself and accept that this is a journey, and celebrate the stuff that you have control over. Because I think
Yeah.
we tend to give ourselves a really hard time around stuff that we don't have a lot of control over, and we tend to celebrate stuff that we didn't really have control over either. So stop celebrating so much the stuff that was like outside of what you had control over, and celebrate more of like the effort and the process and the optimization and the patience you have with yourself and that sort of thing. Put your self-esteem in that stuff.
I love it.
Absolutely. 10,000 hours, right? It takes 10,000 hours to master
Yeah.
anything, right? And a lot of people want to get it done in 10 minutes. Uh,
Yeah.
that's not how it works, unfortunately. I mean, it may be, but it usually doesn't. I haven't seen it done anyways. So that's interesting. So what's next for you? Where do you go from here?
Yeah. I think what I'm really focused on right now is really building out. We want to be a one-stop shop for B2B sales professionals.
Mhm.
So I focused primarily when Russ and I first met on outbound. So how to get that first meeting, and what we focus on a lot now is how to run a good call, how to, deliver a good demo, how to multi-thread, how to negotiate, that sort of stuff. So I'm really trying to level up all of that content. I want to be the go-to place for sales reps and leaders to learn those foundational skills, because that's what people need help with right now.
Mhm.
They need basic 100, 200, and a little bit of 300 level stuff.
Yeah.
Do the basics. That's what I'm trying to help people with. I care a lot about helping salespeople have those aha moments, and I care a lot about helping them make more money too, because sales is a profession where if you do really well at it, like screw this in America stuff, like work for the government for 20 years and then retire and get a pension. Dude, if you have a really good sales career for 20 years, like you can retire, no problem, dude, if you're good with your money. So that's what I want help people to capitalize like on that opportunity, the financial opportunity, the financial freedom that you can create for yourself if you're good at this line of work.
Yeah. If you could just sidestep for without any limits or boundaries, what is it that you would do tomorrow?
I wouldn't get into a different business than I'm in right now. What I would think about is how I'm growing it. Like typically, so I would answer this question the same way if it was you're given $20 million right now. What do you do with it? To me, that just helps get to the goal faster. People. That's what I would invest in. So I would have more talented people on my team.
Yeah, fantastic.
So I wouldn't necessarily be doing anything different. I don't think.
Yeah. So is the vision to grow your company, or in terms of volume that you do, or is the vision, or also is the vision to do it maybe internationally?
Yeah, I mean, I work with international clients now. I think that the thing for me, my North Star in life is like, I want to be able to retire in 10 or 15 years if I want to.
Yeah.
So we live off of about 20% of what we make right now. So we save very aggressively and invest very aggressively. And my goal would be, hey, when I have a kid that's in middle school right now, I'm working totally 100% because I want to. That would be my goal, is to completely have no financial obligations or stress at all, would be my goal. That's the big kind of North Star. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to retire at 50. I really got to hurry up here.
Yeah.
Anyways, hey, Jason, it was an absolute pleasure. I have one more question we usually ask. If you were to meet your 16-year-old self, what is the advice you would give him?
Yeah. Love this question. So I would say that I'm really big on regret minimization. It's a framework that Jeff Bezos talks about a lot. And if you haven't heard of it, it's essentially this thinking about how to limit future regret for yourself. So at 16, what I would say is one of the things that you're probably going to regret not doing more of is being way more social. Because I mentioned I was very shy at the beginning of this, being more social, making more friends, and just having more fun and not being so serious about stuff. That's what advice I would give myself. And it would be like, dude, things are going to work out for you, man. Like you're going to find a wife that you're very happy to be with. You're going to have a job that you really love. You're going to be able to meet your financial goals and all that kind of stuff. So like, just don't worry so much about that. Keep working hard like you're doing. Things will work out. While you're doing it, this like social skill, like you need to, like if you develop that earlier in life, it's going to serve you. It's going to really serve you. So that's one thing I wish I would have developed sooner in life.
Fantastic.
Good stuff.
That is thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure meeting you. It was an absolute inspiring to listen to you, and I'm going to try to apply some of it tomorrow already.
Definitely gonna have to play this back and listen. That's a whole bunch of great stuff there. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
I
got to get to a meeting, so it's good talking to you, Russ, again, and Maurice, is nice meeting you.
Yep.
One bald guy to another bald guy. You know what I mean? So, all right,
Take
guys.
All right, you take care.
Later.